Shakil Afridi, who helped catch Osama Bin Laden, gets 33 years in prison. Some in the United States call this outrageous. Find out what a recent poll says about Asian American voting trends. A group of Pakistani officials are in Massachusetts to learn from local, state, and federal counterparts. A Sri Lankan native and a Clark University student is named a Steinbrecher Fellow. Hello, I'm Esther Varda. Welcome to SA News, bringing you news, views, and entertainment from the South Asian community in the United States. U.S. officials are criticizing the Pakistani government for punishing the doctor who helped the CIA catch Osama Bin Laden. Shakil Afridi received a 33-year sentence for helping prove that Bin Laden was living in the Abbottabad compound where he was killed. Afridi, a physician, is accused of treason. Last week, a U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee voted to cut $33 million in U.S. aid to Pakistan in retaliation for the 33-year sentence. This comes at a complicated time for U.S.-Pakistani relations. Pakistan is still upset over the Bin Laden raid. The country also recently closed key supply lines to Afghanistan because it wants the United States to apologize for a raid that killed 24 soldiers last year. Pakistan also wants the U.S. to stop drone attacks. All of this brings U.S.-Pakistani relations to a boiling point. Michael Kugelman is a program associate at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. He specializes in South Asian studies. He is a frequent contributor to publications such as World Politics Review, Times of India, and the Huffington Post, just to name a few. He joins us via Skype for more on this.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Interesting times with U.S.-Pakistani relations, this latest one with Dr. Afridi receiving a 33-year sentence. What do you make of this situation?
It's really a disaster. I think that the right thing for Pakistan to do would have been essentially to expel Afridi as that he come to the United States. That would have been the simplest thing. I think everyone would have been happy in that regard. I'd argue that 33 years of jail for this doctor who helped hunt down Bin Laden is not the right verdict. I would argue, though, that Pakistan has its reasons for doing what it did. Let's face it, what the doctor did was illegal by Pakistani law. I mean, he worked with a foreign intelligence agency, the CIA, without Pakistan knowing about it. So that's illegal. Of course, I'd argue that given what he was doing, working with the CIA to help hunt down the world's most wanted terrorist, whose organization has been responsible for many deaths in Pakistan over the years, is very honorable in that regard. But it's a very complex story, and it's really made Pakistan relations even worse with the U.S.
So, Michael, this brings another issue between the U.S. and Pakistani relations. We've got the 24 people that were killed last year. Pakistanis are still waiting for an apology. The Pakistanis, in turn, closed down a key access route to Afghanistan, and they're still upset about drones. So what happens next between the Pakistani-U.S. relations?
Well, I think that there will be some sort of agreement on getting the NATO supply lines reopened. I really think that's going to happen. It's going to take some more time. It's going to come down to basically how much money the United States is willing to pay per convoy truck. I don't think the agreement will be reached by the United States apologizing for that accidental raid that killed those 24 soldiers. That's not going to happen for several reasons. One being that, apologizing would be acknowledging guilt. And the United States government is convinced that it was not responsible. It was responsible for the killing of these 24 soldiers, but that it was an accident, and that both sides were to blame. The other reason that you're not going to hear an apology for that accidental attack is really a domestic political issue in the U.S. I mean, I think if Obama were to apologize, his Republican opponents would probably use that as fodder, that he's weak on national security, things like that. And you could agree or disagree with that view, but I think that's basically why we're not going to have an apology anytime soon.
But again, Bilal Bhutto Zardawi, the son of Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, who is also the chair of the Pakistan People's Party, said on Andrea Mitchell recently that he asked the American citizens to consider if 24 of their own soldiers were killed, wouldn't they expect some kind of an apology, whether an accident or not?
Oh, absolutely, and this goes to what you could argue is an example of hypocrisy or double standards in U.S. policies, which many people argue these occur across the board in how the U.S. conducts its foreign policy. Feels it is the only superpower in the world that it has some sort of right to get away with things or do things or not do things that other countries wouldn't have the ability to do. So yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, this country, the United States, is a very patriotic country. It has a lot of respect for its armed services, and yeah, if there were 24 American soldiers killed, even if accidentally by an outside force, particularly a country that doesn't have very good relations with the U.S., then absolutely you'd have people clamoring for an apology. The same people that are insisting that we shouldn't apologize to Pakistan, they would be arguing that Pakistan should apologize for us in that context.
Michael, what needs to happen to clean up this relationship with one of our key allies?
Well, there's really not much that can be done because there's really not much the two sides have going for themselves anymore. Really, what it comes down to, I think, is coming to an agreement on this NATO supply routes, getting those supply routes opened. I think that that's actually something that can work. The two sides can come to an agreement. The United States, for obvious reasons, needs those routes, and Pakistan wants to ensure that it keeps getting military assistance from the U.S.
U.S. officials say that it's almost amounting to extortion how much they're charging.
Yeah, well, it would amount to about $1 million a day based on what Pakistan had asked for, which $365 million a year, given the economic climate in this country and given how suspicious people are here about Pakistan, to me that seems like a no-starter.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much. We'll be speaking to you a little bit later.
Thank you.
Several political polls show Asian Americans are more likely to vote for a Democrat, but there are plenty who are still undecided on who they will vote for in this year's presidential election. The Asian American Justice Center did a first-of-its-kind comprehensive look at how Asian Americans and Pacific Island voters would cast their ballots in 2012. The findings are stunning and shed light into a growing and mostly untapped population. Asians are the fastest growing ethnic group in the United States, according to the Census Bureau, increasing 46% between 2000 and 2010. The poll shows that President Obama is in high favor compared to presumptive Republican nominee Mitt Romney, 73% compared to 44%. But many have not made up their mind. Some do not know what to think of Romney. Others are registered independent. 53% identified themselves as Democrats, 16% as Republicans, and 31% are independent. When asked about who would be better for the economy and foreign policy, a significant number did not know who would be better for the country. The poll also shows that less than a third were contacted by the Democratic Party in the last 2 years, while 37% of Republicans said they heard a great deal from their party. Look for more on this poll in a later episode of SA News. A group of Pakistani public administrators are in Massachusetts training with their government counterparts. The program is run by the Institute for Training and Development in Amherst with a grant from the U.S. Department of State. Among the goals is to discuss how to curb corruption, lessen bureaucracy, and develop a long and lasting relationship between the two countries. Over a 5-year span, 75 Pakistani officials will take part in the program. The first group visited in 2011. A third group is in Massachusetts from April 28th to June 1st. After orientation, they'll spend 2 to 4 weeks in a shadow internship with local, state, and federal government officials. The group will also visit Washington, D.C., Boston, and New York City, and then debrief at the U.S. State Department before heading back to Pakistan. Again, Michael Kugelman joins us with analysis.
Thanks for coming back, Michael. Despite what we heard about how bad really relationship is between the U.S. and Pakistan, there are some good things happening. For example, this group of Pakistanis coming here and essentially learning how our local, state, and federal governments work. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's great. These exchanges happen more than one may think because they really don't get much attention. I mean, you hear so much about how the two sides don't talk to each other, but yeah, it's true. You do have these exchanges, government to government exchanges. I mean, there are student to student exchanges, private citizen to private citizen exchanges, but these government to government exchanges, I think they're great. I think it's a great idea, and I've met with some of these groups when they've come to Washington. They're very impressive officials. They really are curious and seem real eager and learning and exchanging, not just hearing what Americans have to say, but also exchanging, giving the Americans their own Pakistani perspective on these issues. So that's definitely a good thing.
How effective is this? Will they go back and implement some of these ideas? Obviously, that's one of the goals of this exchange, that the Pakistanis will then go back home, implement some of the lessons learned, for instance, how to stop bureaucracy, curb corruption, etc.
Well, you're right. I think that's the big question, is what happens afterward when they get home. And frankly, I have to be a bit of a cynic. I mean, I did say that these people are really impressive and seem interested in learning and taking back what they learned. But then again, I mean, let's face it, these are usually one-off affairs. They come here, they go back to Pakistan. Will their counterparts really be interested in hearing what they have to say about what they learned, particularly since it came from a trip to the United States? And, there's just the relationship is so poisoned that, I fear that if these people go back, that what they have to say wouldn't be taken seriously, which is really a shame. But I'm still saying it's a great idea, though I'm a bit cynical.
Now, I hate to be the one who's cynical, but is this just a show by the State Department?
Well, yes, I definitely think that's true to an extent. I mean, it's sort of an opportunity to show that something is being done to keep the relationship together. But then again, as I said before, these things happen more than one would think. I mean, I'd say for years and years these have happened. It's not just that since the relationship has deteriorated so much that Washington is so desperate to have some sort of dog and pony show, so to speak, to show that there is still an intent here to keep the relationship alive. These programs have been going on for quite some time.
All right, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next week, we will meet with some of the Pakistani officials and talk to their hosts. India-U.S. relations are also at a critical stage. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was in India earlier this month, asking the country to reduce its import of Iranian oil. Last week, we spoke to Neil Pataconi, a geopolitics fellow at the Takashashila Institute, about her visit and about U.S.-India relations. Pataconi has written extensively about the two countries. His work is published in the Journal of International Affairs, the World Affairs Journal, Christian Science Monitor, as well as many others. Here's more of our conversation.
Recent article in the National Interest, you discuss the role of India in America's strategic pivot, and you end the article by saying while America tries to take on the dragon, or China, it cannot overlook the elephant in the continent and what it might bring.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean in there?
Well, the strategic pivot, just to give a little context, is a document and idea put forth by the Obama administration's State Department and Department of Defense that was saying that the United States military should begin to sort of shift from its current preoccupations in the Middle East and Central Asia and towards East Asia and Southeast Asia. And the Indian Ocean region, which is anticipated to become sort of the central focal point of geopolitics in the 21st century. And so with that, I guess sort of the underlying subtext of that geostrategic shift, or that strategic pivot, is the idea of containing a rising China. And so there are two geographic assets, in a sense, that India brings to this table, because China's sort of encroaching upon what India is seen as its traditional strategic space, the Indian Ocean and the Indian subcontinent. India's got two strategic assets. The first is this link that I'd mentioned earlier, the Chabahar Road in eastern Iran, that opens up a new point of access from the Arabian Sea to Afghanistan. So that gives it access to a lot of the energy resources in that region, as well as strategic access to whatever political developments might go on there. And then on the other hand, it's also got a naval base at Port Blair in the Andaman Islands, which is right at the mouth of the Strait of Malacca, which Malacca itself is sort of between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, and it's a narrow little strait on which China really depends for most of its exports and imports of raw materials. So because India's got that very strategic location at Port Blair, would be able to sort of manage China's expansion into the Indian Ocean there, or in Central Asia through Chabahar and Iran. So those are two geographic assets that India sort of brings to this geopolitical ball game, I guess, if you will.
A Clark University student and a Sri Lankan native has been named a Steinbrecher Fellows. Kulani Panaputia Diaz is one of 10 chosen to undertake a project during the 2012-2013 academic year. Diaz is going to take on a timely project for her country, examining the psychological mechanisms that maintain and propel violence and hostile attitude between ethnic groups. Look for an interview with Diaz at a later episode of SAW News. That's our show for this week. If you want to see some past episodes, go to bostonlanka.com. Until then, we'll see you next week on SAW News.